Okay, good day everyone. Welcome to our topic 2 of the transportation management. So today we are going to explore the core participants, the regulations, and intermediaries that keep global supply chains moving. As a future customs professionals, understanding who moves freight and why they move it is the key to mastering trade compliance. Okay? So for example, when a company in Vietnam sells 1,000 t-shirts to a shop in Metro Manila, so there are multiple parties, the factory, a shipping line, truck drivers, customs officer, and store manager. So they must interact with each other. Okay, so let's look at our objectives today. We will identify the five primary transportation participants and also analyze where their goals align or conflict. And we will also examine intermediaries like freight forwarders, customs brokers, and 3PLs. Remember, every shipment entering a port represents legal duties and also border security inspections and a contractual transfer of responsibilities. Okay, so for the section 1, the transportation ecosystem. So here we examine the primary stakeholders and the economic market forces that shape everyday shipping decisions. Okay, so for example, the transport ecosystem is like a web where a delay at an ocean port immediately creates a backlog for warehouses and also sa retail stores. Okay, so there are five primary participants in macro transportation. So first is the shipper, carrier, consignee, government, and public. Okay, so for the shipper, it is also considered as the consignor. So this is the originator of the freight demand. And for the carrier, s- this is for fleet or asset owner executing the movement. Okay, for the consignee, this is the receiver at the destination. And for the government, this is the regulatory and infrastructure authority. And for the public, this is societal stakeholder affected by the transport operations. So for example, the shipper is the Nike, no? They hires Maersk Line, which is the carrier, to ship the shoes to a local retailer. So the local retailer is the consignee. And then regulated by the Bureau of Customs, which is considered as the government, while local residents or the public itself demand quiet roads and low truck exhaust emissions. Okay, so that's the five primary transportation participants. Okay, so let's talk about our very first participant in the transportation ecosystem, which is the shipper, or also known as the consignor. So the shipper is the person or company that creates the need for shipping in the first place. Okay? Because they have goods that need to move from point A to point B. And now, what is the main goal of a shipper? Their primary objective is to keep their total landed cost as low as possible while still keeping their customers happy. Okay, so to do this, shippers care about three key drivers. Okay, the predictable transit time, optimized freight rates, and making sure goods arrive damage free. Okay, because of these drivers, the shipper has to make crucial strategic decisions like picking the right mode of transport and also choosing cargo packaging and negotiating prices with carriers. Okay, now Look at the right side of the slide because this concept is vital for customs professionals. Okay? So the total landed cost, this is the landed cost is not just the fee you pay the shipping line. Okay? So the landed cost is equivalent to the production cost plus the freight plus the customs duties and taxes plus insurance plus handling fee plus inventory carrying cost. Okay? So if a shipper only focuses on getting the absolute cheapest freight rate, it can actually backfire. For instance, if a cheaper shipping line takes 2 extra months to deliver, the shipper spends way more money holding that inventory in a warehouse or paying customs delay penalties. All right? So a cheap freight rate is not worth it if it causes massive delays. Okay? Again, who is the shipper? This is the seller or the manufacturer who owns the goods and needs them transported to a buyer or warehouse. And what is total landed cost? It is the complete total cost of a product by the time it safely arrives at its final destination. So you must add every single expense from the manufacturing, shipping fees, customs duties, insurance, port handling fees, and warehouse storage costs. Okay, next. Now that we know shippers want to minimize their total landed cost, how do they actually choose which transportation service to hire? Okay, so they look at 4 core service components. Okay, so let's break them down one by one. First is the transit time. This is the total time it takes from the moment a carrier picks up the cargo until it is delivered. Why does this speed matter? Because the longer your goods are sitting in transit on a ship or truck, the more money you have locked up in pipeline inventory. Okay, so long transit times also force you to keep extra safety stock in your warehouse just in case. Second is the reliability. So this is all about consistency. Okay, it's not just about being fast, it's about delivering on the promised date every single time. So if a carrier says delivery takes 5 days but sometimes takes 10 days, that unreliability forces shippers to hold expensive buffer stock so they don't run out of products. Okay, third, the accessibility. This is the carrier's ability to pick up and deliver cargo directly to specific locations. So this is what we call the door-to-door service. Okay, so trucks can drive directly to almost any factory or retail dock, whereas a container ship can only dock at a seaport. Okay, and fourth, capability. Does the carrier have the special equipment needed for your specific cargo? Can they offer temperature controlled trucks, such as the reefers for the frozen food, or handle dangerous or hazardous materials safely? Okay, so when shippers choose a transport partner, they weigh these 4 factors against the price. Okay, again, the transit time, this is the speed of movement from origin to destination. Reliability, this is the schedule accuracy and consistency. Accessibility, this is the ability to reach specific physical locations directly. And the capability, this is having the right specialized equipment for unique cargo types. Okay, for example, the transit versus the capability. No, so imagine We have an ice cream manufacturer shipping frozen tubs from Laguna to Davao. So they need the carrier with the capability of temperature control, no? A refrigerated truck or the reefer truck so that the product doesn't melt. Okay? So they also need fast transit time. So that the product stays fresh and also reaches the store shelves quickly. Okay, so they need a fast transit time. And for the reliability versus the accessibility, so let's say a smartphone retailer, they launch a new phone model on Friday. Okay, so the reliability is crucial here. If the carrier promises delivery on Thursday but arrives on Monday, so the launch is ruined and the sales are lost. And for the accessibility matters because the delivery truck must be able to drive directly to the retail store's loading bay downtown rather than dropping the boxes at a distant sea terminal. Right? Next. Okay, so now we arrive at our second major participant, the carrier or the transport provider. So while the shipper creates the demand for transport, the carrier provides the supply. So carriers invest huge amounts of money into expensive assets. So think cargo trucks, ocean vessels, airplanes, and freight terminals to move goods, either to make a direct profit or to serve their own supply chain efficiently. So let's look at the two primary types of carriers on the left. For, har- for hire carriers, so these are companies that sell shipping services to anyone who needs them or to a specific contract clients. And for the private carriers, so these are fleets owned directly by companies that are not primarily transport firms, but use their own vehicles to move their own products. So that's private carriers. Now, flip over to the right side. What is a carrier's main operational focus? First is the asset utilization. So let's say a truck or container ship sitting idle in a parking lot or port is costing money without generating any single cent. No? So the carriers must keep their vehicles full and moving. Okay, so that is for the asset utilizations. And for the backhaul management, so this is critical, no? Driving a full truck from point A to point B earns money. But driving the truck back empty, they called it deadhead or empty backhaul. Okay? So this is a waste of fuel and the driver pay while making zero income. Next is the yield management. So using flexible pricing to ensure the capacity is filled at the highest possible revenue. For the cost structure optimization, so keeping tight control over daily operating costs like fuel, crew salaries, and regular maintenance. So in short, a carrier's life revolves around filling space, avoiding empty trips, and keeping wheels turning. Right? Okay, now let's look at the carrier economics through this slide. So notice how different transportation modes have completely different financial balances between fixed cost and variable cost. Okay, so first, Fixed costs are expenses a company pays no matter what. Okay, even if their vehicles are parked or moving zero cargo. So that is fixed cost. And for the variable cost, these are the expenses that go up or down depending on how many trips, miles, or kilometers they drive. Okay, so let's compare the five main transport modes. Motor carriers or the trucking. So trucking has a low fixed cost ratio, approximately 10 to 20%, but a high variable cost ratio, approximately 80 to 90%. Why? Because trucks run on public roads built by the government. So the primary fixed assets are just the trucks and depots. But every time a truck hits the road, the company spends heavily on fuel and also the salary of the driver, the highway tolls, and the tire wear. Okay, so the maintenance of the truck. And for the railroads, so rail operates on the opposite spectrum with a high fixed cost ratio, approximately 50 to 60%. Right? So the railroad companies must buy land and construct their own private trucks and also engines and right of way. Okay, so the variable expenses include the diesel, the they have to train crews and equipment maintenance. For the airlines, the cargo airlines operate with the moderate fixed cost, approximately 30%, and high variable cost, approximately 70%. So their main fixed expenses are expensive aircraft purchases or lease fees, while jet fuel, flight crew pay, and airport landing fees drive variable expenses. Okay, for the water carriers or the ships, the ocean shipping has a low fixed cost, approximately 15 to 25% relative to variable operational cost. So the primary fixed assets are ships, while heavy variable costs come from bunker fuel, uh, also the port dues and vessel crew wages. For the pipelines have the highest fixed cost ratio, 80 to 90%, and the lowest variable cost ratio, approximately 10 to 20%. So building miles of steel pipes and pumping station cost massive amounts of capital upfront. However, once the pipe is laid underground, the variable cost to pump oil or gas through it's mostly just the electricity needed to power the pumps. Okay, so now the modal spectrum in the global logistics. Okay, now that we understand carrier cost structures, so let's look at how these different modes fit into the global shipping spectrum. So each transport mode serves as a unique functions based on its volume, capacity, speed, and cost. So let's break down the two main categories shown on this slide. Water and ocean carriers. So look at the image on the left showing those massive container ships. So the ocean shipping is the absolute backbone of global trade, carrying roughly 80% of all world freight. Why is it so dominant? Because it has massive carrying capacity and the lowest cost per ton mile. However, its major trade-off is slow transit times. So it takes weeks for a ships to cross oceans. Second one is the air and motor carriers. On the other side of the spectrum, we have air and motor transport. So for the air, It offers the absolute highest speed. No, it is ideal for high volume, for lightweight cargo or perishable cargo, where fast delivery justifies the high cost. Okay, for the motor carriers, such as trucking, they provide something ocean and air never can on their own. Okay, so the ultimate door-to-door flexibility and accessibility. So the ships and cargo planes can only travel between ports and airports. So trucks are needed to pick up goods from the factory and complete the final delivery to the store docks. All right, so in modern supply chains, so these modes work together seamlessly in what we call intermodal transportation. Okay, so for example, for the water or and ocean carriers, so heavy lifting and bulk capacity at the lowest unit cost, but takes the longest time. For the air carriers, this is the maximum, it has the maximum speed for for expensive or time sensitive items, but limited weight capacity and high cost. Okay? So now we turn our attention to our third major participant, the consignee, also known as the receiver. So the consignee is the recipient sitting at the destination point. So they could be a manufacturing plant waiting for raw materials. They could be a wholesaler, a retailer store, or even an end consumer like you and me. Okay, so let's look at the consignee profile on the left. Okay, so the key responsibility of the consignee, their primary job is to receive, inspect, and unload goods when the carrier arrives. Okay, so when the consignee signs the bill of lading or the delivery receipt, they officially accept the shipment. Okay, so that signature marks the legal transfer of liability from the carrier to the receiver. Okay, so in international trade, the consignee is often designated as the importer of record. That means they are legally responsible for paying customs duties and taxes and proving regulatory compliance. Now, flip over to the right side. What are the consignee's priorities? On-time delivery windows. So large receivers set strict delivery appointments. Arriving late or even too early can disrupt dock operations and will result in financial penalties called the compliance chargebacks. Okay, and for the order completeness and integrity, as the trucks are unloaded, workers will verify counts against packing slips to catch what we call the OSND, which is the overage or the too much cargo. Shortage is the meaning missing boxes or damage or the broken items. So that is OS and D. Okay. Next, unloading efficiency. So the receivers must unload equipment fast. So if they take too long, they run into extra carrier fees called demurrage or detention. Okay. Next, so listen closely. Future customs professionals. So because this slide covers two financial penalty terms you will hear every single day in customs administration, the demurrage and detention, right? So when carriers ship containerized freight, they give consignees a specific number of free days to pick up and return equipment. Okay? So if you exceed those 3 days, several financial penalty fees start racking up daily. Okay? Here is the key distinction to remember. The demurrage, this is the fee charge when your cargo or container remains inside the port or terminal beyond the allowed free time. Okay, so the container is sitting on port ground, taking up valuable terminal space. That is for the demurrage. While the detention, this is the fee charge when you have pulled the carrier's equipment, like the container, the chassis, or trailer, outside the terminal and held onto it past your free time before returning the empty box to the port yard. Okay? So that is for the detention. Now, why is this critical for customs administration? Because customs holds are one of the leading causes of demurrage and detention charges. Right? If an importer submits incomplete or incorrect customs documentations, the customs authority puts a hold on the shipment, preventing container release at the port gates. While that paperwork issue is getting resolved, the clock keeps ticking. Okay? And it accumulates hundreds or thousands of dollars in daily demurrage. Okay? So to avoid these costly penalties, the consignees must coordinate early with their customs brokers to pre-clear goods before the vessel even discharge at the port. Right? Okay, next. Okay, so now that we've covered the commercial side of shipping, shippers, carriers, and consignees, so it's time to turn our attention to government and public stakeholders. So this section is a transition slide, but it sets up a crucial idea. The commercial trade cannot operate in a vacuum. Okay? Private transport companies need highways, ports, and safety rules, which are all provided and governed by the public sector. Okay, so in this section, we are going to explore 5 core topics. Okay, so first, let's examine our fourth major participant, which is the government. Notice how the government plays a unique dual role in transportation, acting as both a provider or promoter on one side and a regulator on the other side. So let's look at role number one, infrastructure provider and promoter on the left. Okay, so individual transport companies cannot afford to construct their own highways and also seaports or airspace control systems. So the government stepping in is necessary. So they build and maintain roadways and highways. They funded using fuel taxes and road user fees. They also build and maintain ports and waterways. No, they dredging ocean channels so deep draft cargo ships can dock, and also managing navigation aids and building public harbor terminals. And also they build and maintain aviation infrastructure. So they construct airports and running air traffic control systems. So now flip to the role number two, market and operational regulator on the right side. So the government does not just build the assets. They enforce the rules to keep transportation safe, fair, and secure. Right? So safety regulations, they setting speed limits, enforcing driver hours of service rules so that the truckers don't fall asleep at the wheel and conducting vessel safety inspections. For the economic policy, they prevent monopoly pricing and encouraging fair competition. Okay, and for the border control and security, so this is where customs administration comes in. Okay, they enforcing trade laws, collecting import duties, and securing borders while ensuring legitimate trade moves smoothly. So simply put, that the government builds the roads, runways, and harbors, and then they set the safety and trade rules for everyone using them. Okay, so let's build on what we just discussed about the government's role by looking at this slide. Types of transportation regulation. So the regulation in transportation is not all the same. It has evolved into three distinct categories over time. So first is the economic regulation. So historically, the government strictly controlled who could enter the market, what routes carriers could drive or fly, and the exact prices they were allowed to charge. However, starting in the late 1970s and 1980s, the governments shifted towards the regulations. Okay, so today, the market mostly dictates shipping prices through free market competition, allowing the shippers and carriers to negotiate rates freely. And for the safety regulation, while economic rules relaxed, safety rules grew much stricter. Safety regulation sets operational requirements to protect transport workers, the drivers, and the general public on shared roads and waterways. So this includes vehicle weight limits to prevent highway distractions, special rules for handling hazardous materials, and mandatory drug testing for truck drivers and pilots, right? So that's one of the safety regulations. Next is the security and customs. So this is right hand section highlighted in dark blue is our bread and butter in customs administration, right? So security regulations safeguard international trade routes against terrorism and also illegal smuggling and commercial fraud. So instead of just checking the papers at the port, modern security focuses on advanced manifest filing, or this is the submitting or the submission of cargo data electronically before the ship leaves the port. Okay, and also high-tech cargo scanning and conducting supply chain security audits. Next, border security and trade facilitation mandate. So this slide directly highlights the double-edged mandate that every customs authority faces, enforcing strict border safety while simultaneously keeping legitimate commercial trade moving fast. So look at the photo on the left showing customs officers physically inspecting a container. Okay, so if customs officers stop and physically open every single container at the port, the global trade would come to a complete standstill. Okay, so but if they don't inspect anything, illegal goods and dangerous contraband would pour across the border. So to balance these two needs, modern customs authorities rely on key international frameworks. First is the WCO Safe Framework. This is a global standards created by the World Customs Organization to align supply chain security and trade facilitation across borders. Next is the AEO, Authorized Economic Operator. This is a partnership program where compliant, highly secure businesses get a BIP treatment, meaning faster green lane customs clearance. Next is the Advanced Manifest Rules 24-hour rule. This is mandating carriers to submit digital cargo declarations before loading cargo onto a ship overseas. So this gives customs time to run automated risk assessment algorithms long before the vessel arrives. Okay? And the tariff revenue and anti-smuggling. So this is all about collecting mandatory import duties and taxes for national budgets while intercepting illegal contraband. So in short, frameworks like AEO and advanced manifest rules allow the customs to fast track low risk shipments, no? So that the officers can focus their physical inspections on the high risk cargo. Now that we know the government acts as an infrastructure provider, so let's answer a critical question. So how does the government actually pay for massive public transportation projects? And is it fair to every transport mode? So let's look at the left side, public funding mechanisms. So the government collect user charges directly from transportation participants to build and maintain public assets. First is the fuel taxes. So gasoline and diesel taxes paid at the pump are directly allocated to government highway funds for road paving and repairs. For the tolls and port dues, directly user fees charged when trucks or ships use a specific expressways and also bridges or harbor channels. For the airport landing fees, this is fees charged to airlines based on aircraft weight to maintain runways and terminal facility. Right? Now look at the right side, public promotion controversy. So this is where economic debates happen. Fairness issues arise when the government appears to promote one mode over another. For example, railroad companies must buy land and construct their private trucks completely out of pocket. Meanwhile, trucking companies operate on public expressway built and maintained by the government using general tax dollars collected from everyday citizens. So the railroads argue this creates an unfair competitive advantage for trucking. Next, so we have reached our fifth and final primary participants, the public and society, acting as social stakeholders. So even though everyday citizens might not buy ocean containers or hire freight trucks directly, so the public is directly or indirectly impacted by every shipment moving through their communities. So let's break down the left side, public expectations. Society, the society holds a three-part balance of expectations. First is the economic access. On a positive note, the transportation creates local jobs and delivers essential goods like food, medicine, and clothing straight to our stores. And for the safety requirements, people demand safer highways, reduced hazardous material risk, and quiet zones so trucks are not blaring air horns in the residential areas. And for the environmental quality, the communities expect protection against toxic air pollution, and also engine noise and coastal water contamination from ships. Okay, now look at the right side in the dark blue, the green logistics imperative. So, freight transportation consumes vast amounts of fossil fuel and generates a huge portion of global greenhouse gas emissions. Because of this, the shippers and carriers face intense pressure from the society and governments to green their operations. So, this includes adopting decarbonization strategies like electric delivery trucks, and also alternative low carbon marine fuels, and precise carbon tracking. So, in short, businesses cannot just focus on profit anymore. They must protect the public and the environment while moving goods. Okay, now let's move on to the congestion, pollution, and sustainability challenges. So, building our own discussion about society, we need to address a critical economic concept. First is the negative externalities. Externalities are side effect costs created by the transport operations that are absorbed by everyday citizens and society rather than by the shipping companies themselves. Okay, so let's break down the three major externalities listed on the left. First is the highway congestion. So when hundreds of freight trucks crowd public highways, it creates massive traffic jams. Okay, so this leads to wasted fuel, longer transit times, and also lost economic productivity for everyone on the road. Next, carbon footprint and emissions. The transportation is a major contributor to global air pollution and climate change. So, to combat this, international bodies step in, such as the International Maritime Organization, enforcing the IMO 2020 rules, which strictly limit the sulfur content allowed in ocean vessel fuels. Next, urban delivery friction. As online shopping grows, thousands of last mile delivery vans block narrow city streets and creating micro freight bottlenecks in busy metropolitan corridors. Okay, so look at the illustration on the right. It shows how trains, highways, aircraft, bicycles, and pedestrians all share the same space. Okay, so managing these sustainability challenges is key to ensuring logistics supports economic growth without destroying public quality of life. Next, that now that we have covered both the commercial entities and government stakeholders, we are moving into the practical mechanism of international trade, which is the intermediaries and customs specialists. Okay, so this slide serves as our transition. Okay, shipping goods internationally is complicated. It involves language barriers, complex trade contracts, customs regulations, and multimodal transport routing. So that's why shippers and buyers rarely handle everything alone. Instead, they rely on specialized middle agents. So in this section, we will examine four major topics. Okay. Okay, so for the transportation intermediaries and service provider, so intermediaries act as the essential bridge connecting shippers, carriers, consignees, and customs authorities. So they simplify global trade by taking care of complex logistics operations. So let's break down the three primary types of service provider on this slide. First is the freight forwarders. They consolidate small shipments known as the LCL or the less than container load, or the 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 LTL or the less than truckload into a full container loads. So they purchase transport capacity in bulk from major carriers at discounted rates and issue their own house bill of lading to individual shippers. Next is the customs brokers. So this is highlighted in blue. These are licensed professionals who act directly on behalf of importers and exporters. So their primary job is to declare goods legally and also calculate the tariff, duties, and taxes accurately and secure official customs release at border point. Next is the 3PL or 4PLs, the third party or fourth party logistics. Okay, so these entities offer fully outsourced integrated supply chain management. So instead of managing just shipping or customs, 3PLs handle warehousing, freight distribution, customs clearance, and supply chain IT tracking all under one roof. In simple terms, forwarders move cargo efficiently, the customs brokers clear cargo legally, and the 3PLs run entire logistics network. Okay, so the difference between the international freight forwarder and an NVOCC or non-vessel operating command carrier. So let's look at the left side first. International freight forwarders. An IFF acts as an expert agent who plans and coordinates shipping. Right? So consolidation experts, they combine smaller LCL shipments into full container loads or FCL to unlock cheaper freight rates. Next, documentation handlers. So they prepare key shipping paperwork like commercial invoices, packing list, certificates of origin, and export declarations. And they are also multimodal operators. So they coordinate seamless door-to-door transit combining air, ocean, rail, and road transportation. Now, flip over to the right side, the NVOCC or the non-vessel operating command carrier. So this is where legal responsibilities change, right? So an NVOCC acts like a carrier, but they do not own or operate physical ships. Instead, they play a dual role. They act as a carrier to the shipper, right? So they issue their own ocean or house ocean bill of lading and assume direct liability for the cargo. And also, they act as a shipper to the actual vessel operator. Okay, so they buy ocean container space in wholesale bulk from companies like Maersk Line or Evergreen and booking that cargo on the actual ocean ship. Okay, again, an IFF is an agent who plans and handles paperwork for your shipment. An NVOCC acts as a legal carrier that sells container space on ships owned by other companies. Okay, so the strategic function of customs broker. So customs brokers are not just paper pushers. They act as key legal and technical advisors in international trade. So let's look at the core responsibilities of customs broker on the left. Harmonized system classifications. All right. So assigning 6 to 10 digit tariff heading codes to imported commodities. All right. So that's one of their responsibilities. Now, a single wrong digit can completely alter duty rates. Next is the customs valuation. They calculate the true transaction value to establish correct customs duties, taxes, and VAT. And also compliance and duty drawback. So they navigate preferential trade agreements like ATIGA in ASEAN and claiming duty refunds for qualifying re-exported goods. And also their responsibility is lodgement of entry electronically. No, this is the transmitting single window clearance declaration directly into the government custom systems. Okay, now look at the dark section on the right, liability and penalties, because customs declarations are legal documents. Inaccuracies or improper filings carry severe consequences. First is the cargo seizures and delays. Okay, when the shipments get flagged and held at the port terminals, your cargo is delayed or even seized by the customs. And also hefty fines, so this is a monetary penalties for the misclassifications or undervaluation. And for the accreditation and revocation and prosecutions, so this is a loss of importer or broker privileges and potential criminal charges for fraud. In short, a customs broker ensures the trade flows smoothly while protecting clients from severe legal and financial pitfalls. Okay, for example, okay, for the HS classification impact, no, the tariff codes determine the exact percentage rate of the import duty applied to a product. For the duty drawback, there is a provision allowing the importers to claim back customs duties paid on the raw materials if those goods are processed and subsequently exported. Right? So for the, let's say, the HS misclassification and penalties. So imagine an importer bringing in leather shoes. So if the importer accidentally declares under the HS code for the rubber slippers to pay a lower duty rate, the customs officers will flag the entry during automated screening. What's the result? So the container gets seized at the port and the importer faces hefty fines for undervaluation or misclassification. Okay? And for the trade agreement compliance, no? So bringing in raw materials from the ASEAN partner country under the ATIGA, a customs broker will verify the certificate of origin to ensure that the cargo qualifies for the 0% preferential duty rate instead of the standard 5% rate, and legally saving the importer thousands of dollars. Right? So that's the responsibilities of the customs brokers. Okay, next. Third-party logistics providers do much more than just store boxes on shelves. They streamline multi-participant workflows inside modern distribution hubs. So let's look at the 3PL value proposition. Cross-docking and inventory staging. So instead of storing goods for months, the 3PL hubs receive inbound cargo and immediately sort or stage it for outbound dispatch to minimize the storage cost. Next is the bonded warehouse. The 3PLs manage specialized government license facilities that allow importers to hold cargo in duty deferred status. Right? So you don't pay import duties or taxes until the goods actually leave the bonded warehouse for the local sales. Next is the customs integration in WMS. So the modern 3PLs connect customs clearance declarations directly into their digital warehouse management system or the WMS. Okay, so this links inventory tracking directly with customs compliance systems in real life. In short, the 3PL hubs combine physical warehouse operations with digital customs integration to keep the inventory moving fast while optimizing the cash flow. All right. So let's explore the Incoterms 2020. So these rules created by the International Chamber of Commerce define the exact point where financial cost, customs duties, and cargo risk shift between the shipper or the seller and the consignee or the buyer. Right, so let's break down the four key terms on this slide, moving from the maximum buyer responsibility to maximum seller responsibility. So for example, the X works. So the buyer assumes almost all the responsibilities. The seller simply makes cargo available at their own factory door. So the buyer pays main freight, clears export customs, and handles import clearance, and absorbs all risk starting right at the factory floor. Next is the FOB, the free on board. This is a classic maritime term. So the seller handles and clears export customs. So once the cargo is loaded onto the vessel, risk transfers to the buyer, who pays for main ocean freight and handles import clearance. For the CIF, or the cost insurance and freight, the seller pays for main freight and maritime insurance to the destination port. However, notice the risk transfer point. Alright, so the risk actually transfers to the buyer the moment the cargo is loaded on board at the origin port. So the buyer handles import clearance. Next is the DDP, or the delivery duty paid. So the complete opposite of X work, right? So this is the opposite of the X work. X works. So the seller assumes maximum responsibility, paying the freight, clearing export customs, and clearing import customs, including the duties and taxes. So the risk only shifts when cargo reaches the named destination. In short, Incoterms remove ambiguity by drawing exact boundaries for the payment, risk, and the customs duties. All right, so now let's explore the stakeholder conflict and global alignment. Because international transportation involves multiple participants: the shippers, carriers, consignees, government agencies, and the public. So their business goals naturally push against each other. So let's examine the left side, the areas of stakeholder conflict. The shipper versus the carrier. So the shipper wants the lowest possible freight rates, while carriers need higher profit margins to stay operational. For the carrier versus consignee, the carriers demand fast turnarounds, no, to keep the equipment moving, while the consignee warehouses often face labor shortages and receiving delays. For the public versus carrier, the society pushes for strict environmental and safety regulations, which increase the operating cost for transport companies. And for the trader versus customs, the importers demand rapid port clearance, while the customs authorities must enforce thorough compliance and physical inspections. Now, turn to the right side, pathways to strategic alignment. How do we resolve these friction points? First is the core carrier partnerships. So the shippers and carriers sign long-term contracts that guarantee capacity for the shipper and reliable cargo volume for the carrier. For the AEO, the traders commit to high compliance standards, and in return, customs grants them fast track green lane processing. And the shared visibility platforms. So the digital tracking platforms give real-time shipment status to all the participants simultaneously and preventing misunderstandings and delays. So in short, while there is conflict in supply chains and that conflicts are uh, inevitable, strategic collaboration and digital transparency turn trade friction into a win-win partnerships. Okay? So, for the information integration across participants, so in uh, in modern global logistics, the physical cargo cannot move effectively without digital data moving right alongside it. Okay, so the technology binds all the supply chain participants together through seamless information sharing. Right? So let's break down the three technological pillars on this slide. EDI and API systems. This is the standardized digital messaging protocols that allow automated B2B communications between the shippers, carriers, and 3PLs without manual human intervention. Examples include the uh, EDI 214, which is the shipment status messages, and the EDI 310, which is the freight invoices. Next is the single window system. So this is a government-backed national customs platforms, such as the National Single Window, NSW, or TradeNet. Okay, so that allow traders to submit standardized import and export documentation just once. Okay, so the platform automatically distribute that data to all relevant government regulatory agencies and eliminating the duplicate paper filings. And end-to-end visibility. So this is highlighted on the right. This leverages GPS tracking, smart sensors, and centralized control towers. Okay, so it delivers live ETA updates to the consignees and provides advanced arrival notifications to port operators. And this is to help, this is to prevent terminal bottlenecks. So in simple terms, EDI connects businesses to businesses. Single window connects businesses to governments. And the IoT visibility connects everyone to the physical cargo in the real time. Okay, so as we near the end of our discussion on transportation participants, let's review the core. Let's have a review. And this slide ties together all five major participants and technical frameworks we've examined. So let's look at the key conceptual takeaways on the left. Multi-stakeholder framework. Okay, so transportation is never a solo effort. Every shipment requires constant negotiation, balancing cost, speed, and reliability across different entities. So, differing stakeholder priorities, the carriers prioritize asset utilization and operating cost ratios. The shippers focus on total landed cost. The consignees focus on receiving window compliance at the destination. And the government balance. The public authorities must balance infrastructure building and promotion with safety regulations, border security, and economic oversight. Now, look at the right box tailored for our field, Customs Administration takeaway. So, the customs clearance is the ultimate convergence point in global trade. It is where legal seller buyer responsibilities under Incoterms. So the carrier transport documents like the bill of lading and the government security mandates intersect. Okay? So mastering every participant's role is essential to managing seamless, compliant border movement. Okay? So that brings us to the end of our lecture today. Thank you so much for your time and active participation or listening. Okay, so before um, I will give you an assignment with regards to this discussion and you submit it to me via private message. Thank you for listening, class. Goodbye.